You're watching MDC-TV.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manny Perez, and I proudly serve as your Dean of Engineering, Technology, and Design here at Miami-Dade College. And I want to welcome you to another session of our AI speaker series. As you know, Miami-Dade College continues to lead efforts in education and AI education and awareness, and we are consistently looking to expand innovative programming around the topic of AI, machine learning, for our community and for our students. And so it gives me great pleasure to be here today with you and introduce our next speaker. Mr. Manuj Aggarwal is an innovative evangelist and one of the leading AI experts globally. He's a published author and has 4 patents in the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Manuj runs a boutique big data and AI consulting company called Tetranoodle Technologies based in Canada. Tetranoodle helps companies of all sizes unlock the power of data and provide compelling technology solutions. Some of the notable clients of Tetranoodle have included Microsoft, IBM, Pearson, Desire to Learn, University of British Columbia, and many others. Manuj is also a passionate educator and is a mentor and coach for entrepreneurs and startup founders. He leads Startup Vancouver, a community of 2,500 startup founders and entrepreneurs. And Manuj is also a host of a popular podcast named Bootstrapping Your Dreams, which is among the top 0.5% of podcasts globally. It is my pleasure to introduce to you and welcome Manuj to our college and to our speaker series today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So today I'm going to be talking about the evolution of life, business, and education in the field of, in the age of artificial intelligence. So a little bit of my story. I grew up in India in a very small town, and my career started at 15 working in a factory. That's a real shot of the factory for $2 a day. And one thing led to another, and I found myself working with the top names in the world, Fortune 500 companies, and now here. These are some of the things that I have done: published author, podcast, as many already mentioned. First of all, I want to be grateful to you. You know, our time and attention is the most valuable commodity we all have. So everybody who has joined, you can be anywhere in the world, but you are giving your time to me. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm really honored and I'm humbled because when I was 17 or 18, I could have killed to be in an institution like this, getting the top class education, but I couldn't make it happen. But you know, after 20, 30 years, I'm here speaking with you guys. It's just a very humbling and very, very exciting opportunity for me. And to students in the audience, I want to say, never underestimate the power you have, because, you know, as I have demonstrated, you guys are way, way ahead of me already. So now about the talk. So AI is everywhere. We have it in our cars, in our phones, everywhere. And even when we talk about AI, whether we talk with technical people who understand the technology or non-technical people, one of the most frequent questions I get asked is AI going to take over the world? Is it going to be like a Terminator style ending where everything will be destroyed by AI? And are we better off giving all our sort of life decisions to these algorithm-driven companies? So these are the questions I'll try to answer. Now, AI has been around for a long time, since 1950s in fact, but initial technologies were very basic algorithms. And then during the 1970s, systems development came into the picture, and then machine learning in 1990s, and now we are working with deep learning algorithms, which have the capability of imitating humans very closely. So today, computers can see, they can hear, they can understand, they can actually make art, they can make images, videos. So it's very, very advanced technology, very powerful technology, but still we have a long ways to go. So we'll explore how did we get here and where we are going. What I try to do is I look at long-term views. And when I say long-term, I'm trying to go back to the initial stages of human evolution, trying to look at how did we evolve as a species. And one thing that stands out is language. Not a lot of species in the world can communicate easily with each other like us humans can. So language has played a huge role in our evolution, and because of language we are able to collaborate, we are able to store and retrieve information. So it has played a huge role in our evolution and helping us become a dominant species. So when we talk about language, at the very beginning of our evolution, the only way information was passed on, even through language, was stories. Because stories are something that we can remember emotionally. We cannot remember facts and figures to a great extent, but stories, when told correctly, they pack a punch of emotion and we can remember them. So everything that we think, we live, how we eat, it has been affected by stories. And when we talk about early evolution, these stories were the actual data that the world had. Like, there was nothing else but the stories. So everything that existed in the world in terms of data were these stories. And these stories were passed on from generation to generation orally. And then as we started to evolve, these stories started to become more complex, more colorful, and we started to record them in books, in recordings, and we really value them. If you take the case of religious texts, our constitutions, these are the stories that we really value and look up to. But the thing is that these stories were in the hands of very few. Information was very scarce, and only a few people had access to these stories, and only fewer still were authorized to tell these stories and pass it on. The other aspect was that as human beings, our lifespans are not very long. So we can expect about 2 or 3 generations, 3 or 4 generations to be able to live together and pass on that information in an interactive manner, right? So as we were evolving, as this information was being passed, along came writing. So that created another turning point in human evolution, because now the information could be preserved for centuries. So it wasn't limited to just a few generations. It can be passed on for centuries. And it has exponentially, writing has exponentially increased our ability to innovate and survive, because now I can go back and say, hey, what were people thinking in the first century or second century, and how did they deal with problems and all that. So if you look at the invention of writing or the history of writing, it was around 3400 BC when we started seeing the initial writings. So they were using shapes like circles, triangles, and geometric shapes to represent objects. And that transformed storytelling and how we passed on knowledge to the next generation. Then around 3000 BC, we invented phonetic science. So from just representing objects in images, we started to think about how do they sound, and then from there we had another abstraction, which was the alphabet. So now you can see how information was growing, and we were devising ways to encapsulate it, to store it, to retrieve it. And not only that, but alphabet also allowed for abstract ideas to be shared. Because before that, we could only represent what we saw in the real world. But with alphabet, we could just make up things and pass abstract ideas on. But the problem was, even after the invention of the alphabet, the distribution of knowledge and information was very, very limited. So people used to write books, and they were hand transcribed, and they were very expensive. And just like I mentioned before, even with the books around, only very rich people, kings, notables could afford these books. And not only that, like even if I go back into my own life, around when I was in university, each book used to cost about $50. That was a lot of money for someone like me. And then in the 15th century, the printing press was invented, which allowed us to reproduce text in great numbers, faster, better, cheaper. And the printing press itself went through a lot of innovation, but the turning point was now information can be distributed at scale. So it became accessible. Books were accessible to the common person who had the interest, but still not very ubiquitous. Not everybody had access to the books. So then came another evolution in information, how we distribute information. In 1972, that was 40 years before the iPad, Alan Kay devised a machine which introduced the idea of reading and writing and sharing information through electronic devices. And then, of course, we all know what happened, internet. So the internet became such a global repository of information that now, today, we cannot imagine our life without it. And no matter how strange a topic is, you can find some information like videos, images, text on anything on the internet, right? That was never possible before in human life, in human evolution. And today, we are producing about 2.5 quintillion, which is 2.5 million terabytes of data every day, all over the globe. So there is so much information now being produced, like for basic needs, like food, drink, shelter, clothing. All we need to do is learn how to synthesize and manipulate data. I mean, one can take this statement in many ways, but if you look at our bank balance, all it is information. It's just some information stored in a database. And if I know how to manipulate that, I can pretty much do anything, right? So you can see now, as the evolution happened, information used to be very scarce and very, very expensive. But now, information is abundant and cheap. So it is a complete radical shift in our evolution. And this has happened in the last 20 years. So Andrew Ng, who's like the authority in AI, he names AI as the new electricity. That's how fundamental it is. Because AI will be embedded in everything. It will transform everything as we go along, just like electricity has done. So in my opinion, next 10, 20, 30 years, they will look so different for us humans that I think it'll be almost like an alien life. And we already experience that to an extent today. We can talk to devices. If you imagine like somebody talking to a device 10 years ago, they'll be put in a mental hospital, I think. So as a consequence of this, meaning a lot of data, AI is so relevant, because otherwise there is no way for us to make any sense of this, right? So there's about 44 zettabytes. I don't even know how many zeros are there in the entire digital universe. And so now every company, every country is trying to figure out how to utilize that data. That data has become oil. It has become the new gold. And the US has almost twice as many data centers than UK, Germany, and China combined. And AI is being used everywhere right now as we speak, in risk management, action management, decision making, everything. So what has happened is data has become abundant and information has become so easily accessible that we are overloaded with information, and now we need specialized skills for data analysis. We need people who can help us make sense of this data. We need people who can synthesize that data and give us the summary of what this really means. And if you look at it, the evidence of this, the most successful companies of last 20 years, they know their data very, very well. So Facebook, Google, Amazon, they're all about $1 trillion each in valuation. And they achieved that in just 20 years. And there have been industrial houses like Colgate-Palmolive and others who have been around for centuries, and they are not worth even a fraction of that. And the reason is because these companies understand how to utilize data. So now let's move further ahead and see what is in store for us. Is AI and disruptive technologies, are they going to take over our jobs? And the answer is yes. We can always look at what is happening today. So cable operators. A lot of us have switched from regular cable to Netflix and Hulu and all those jobs related to maintaining this infrastructure. They are slowly going out of fashion. Drivers and taxi service providers. So there are about 10 million jobs in US alone based on driving. So they basically just drive, truck drivers and all. And these jobs will be eliminated because there will not be any need for humans to do this anymore, unless it's for pleasure. Doctors and nurses. So, doctors basically do three things: diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. And all of these are already today, a lot of these are being offloaded to AI. AI is doing our diagnosis and recommending prescriptions. Then comes agriculture workers, which is the most traditional industry. In 1800s, US had the working population was about 50% of them used to work in farms, but now it is less than 2%, even though there's more food being produced than ever, and that's because of automation, AI. Print media, so many magazines and newspapers have gone out of business because everything has moved online. To the extent that some of the news that we read, even that is generated by AI. Tax accountants and cashiers. So these are repetitive jobs where you need to do certain things over and over again. And we see that in big box stores, they're already being replaced by automated, kiosks. So that's where we are. But the thing is, it's even more alarming than what we think. The Industrial Revolution involved human augmentation. The AI revolution involves human replacement. So the point of automation is to reduce overhead on salaries, benefits, and error. And we already see that this is being done through robots and AI. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. The difference is that we are not eliminating people from the job market. We are just eliminating jobs from the labor market. So how to address that is because humans are so adaptable. That is what has made us so powerful on this planet. Because we can live in any condition, we can figure things out, and we can survive. And that is the main thing that will help us move into the next era of AI. And we have done this before as well. So when industrial revolution started, before that in 1700s, most of the people used to work in fields or manual labor to make ends meet. But then as the steam engine was invented and industrial revolution happened, people became machine operators, or people became mechanics, or people who can really run these enterprises. So there were new types of jobs created, and people were able to adapt to this new economy. The same thing happened when automobile was introduced, because before that, the whole economy used to depend on horses or rails. And with the automobile, people had to shift gears again. I mean, people who were tending the horses or fixing the carts, they had to figure out how to provide services to the automobile industry. When Model T was introduced in 1908, only 2% of the Americans owned automobiles, and today there are about 250 million automobiles in US. So that's about one vehicle for each US resident. So what is the good news? The good news is that experts predict robots will take over only jobs that are repetitive. And AI systems, as far as I know, they cannot replace human gifts of creativity, innovation, and empathy. If there is a future algorithm which will enable it, maybe, but I don't think so. So, for example, in healthcare, AI will be best utilized to enhance decision making rather than replace doctors and nurses. So, what is the way forward? How do we help our future generations to prepare for this? You see, as leaders, as people involved in education, we have to remember that companies will always need to increase their revenue, lower the cost, and delight customers. That is universal. That's not going to change. But doing that moving forward will require constant innovation. And so the message is that thinking outside the box in the future will no longer be a matter of choice, but it is going to be an obligation. So the more that we can think outside the box, push the boundary of technology, the better we will be. The other thing is right brain and left brain development. Today, in most disciplines, we either focus on the right brain, which is analytical, rational, and logical, the left brain, or the right brain, which is imaginative, intuitive, and holistic. So moving forward, we'll need to find ways to combine the development of these two hemispheres, because they'll need to work together. Emotional intelligence and empathy. So as machines take over and do most of the thinking on our behalf, what we are left with is our ability to empathize with other people, connect with other people. Machines cannot do that. So that level of emotional intelligence and empathy will be a superpower for people who are going to be leading the charge in this next phase. Storytelling. So as I started off with storytelling will become even more crucial, because now we have to synthesize the data and create a story around it so that we can convey our message to other people. They can remember it. And even in data science today, there is a whole field called data visualization, which revolves around storytelling. So storytelling will always be a skill that will help in both personal life and professional life. Still on the way forward, specialized jobs will give way to holistic jobs, and focus will turn from hard skills to a combination of hard and soft skills, with the focus being on soft skills more. And again, as I said, storytelling with data will be always in demand. So what I can say is that if we look at the history, what machines did was it freed up our hands and limbs to do whatever we wanted with them. Before that, we used to work, almost non-stop in fields, 7 days a week. But now AI will free up our minds to do whatever we want. So what that will lead to is more energy and time and resources will be invested in things that give us true pleasure, art, innovation, and connecting with others. And the other thing is, I believe, and a lot of people talk about this, we are entering into the age of abundance because of AI. Because as automation takes over, AI takes over, the cost of producing the goods, transferring them, all that will become cheaper, which will lead to abundance. And it will lead to hyper-personalization, meaning today we mass produce everything because that is the only way to, distribute goods at scale at the reasonable cost. But with AI and automation, we can personalize everything that we buy, even to the extent we can personalize the medicine that is prescribed to a patient based on their genome record. Customization. So all these things will be possible because of AI. And here are a couple of examples I want to mention. Today, most of the institutions, educational institutions, when they prepare a curriculum, it's one size fits all. But there are some systems, this is one of the systems that we produced, where the curriculum itself is flexible enough to accommodate every student individually in the class. And then here is another one where a lot of students drop out. In fact, 30% of the students drop out in their degree programs in the first couple of years because they realize whatever they are learning, whatever they have signed up for is not of interest to them. So in this case, we created a system almost like a Netflix type of a system where Netflix recommends shows to us based on our interest. So this system recommends courses to the students based on their interest. And the result is that 20% more courses are taken to finish their degree programs and dropout rates decline. So you can see some examples of personalization already happening today. So that's it. That was my talk. I think it was quite brief. I'm happy to share this perspective. Happy to answer any questions.
My name is Anabel Mederos. I'm the project manager for Artificial Intelligence for All. It's a huge project that we're developing here at MDC, and basically we're bringing the revolution of AI to our college. So I'm going to open to some questions. Actually, we're having some of our students that are joining us via the streaming. So I will start the questions with the online audience that we're receiving right now. And of course, I will pass also the questions to our public. So this is a question from Bryce Lawrence from Computer Programming. He's mentioning, you have been explaining how AI is going to change our society. What are the current challenges for our workforce?
Today, I think the challenges today are, first of all, we are going through a disruptive time right now. A lot of people are, the pandemic has caused even more disruption because we are going through challenges of hybrid work, remote work. The key is to learn to communicate better, to understand other people's priorities better. The more we can understand other people's priorities, we can come up with solutions that fit their perspective better. And that goes from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top. So if we are able to understand each other's priorities, we'll be able to collaborate better, we'll be able to provide better solutions, we'll be able to get more done and have not only progress for ourselves, but for others. So the more we can focus on what other people need from us, how we can contribute, how we can communicate, that will be really amazing. And this will prepare us for, the wave of this AI taking over anyways, like I mentioned. The emotional intelligence, empathy, these are going to be really, really critical moving forward. So might as well start today.
Sure. That's why the AI Speaker Series is one of my favorite events. So because it's actually the time when we're bringing the opportunity to have a top expert in the field actually presenting and sharing his experiences with our students, with our faculty, with our community. So it's basically when you could have the real chance to see how is AI in action. I'm having a different question from Martha Mila from Computer Programming. So she's asking about where she can find your books and also listening to your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, podcast is easy. Just Google my name or Bootstrapping Your Dreams, and you can find it. The books are very technical, so unless you want to go to sleep, I won't recommend them. They are very, very specific to a certain topic in cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure. So you can find them on Amazon if you're interested. Just Google my name or search my name on Amazon.
No, maybe we can bring also the books to our current classes. That would be very interesting. Are we having any questions from our audience today? There are the microphones that are standing, but we could also help you with a microphone if it's more convenient.
I always like to help the audience not be shy. My name is Aaron Burciaga, and it's my pleasure to help schedule some of these events. So let me start off with a question and invite you to a question as well. I'm always fascinated when we start talking about human evolution and how this is a natural step in that. You know, as you were speaking, I was just kind of thinking about how a stagecoachman might describe a car, or how an ancient aqueduct engineer might describe bottled water, right? Just almost unfathomable. And so I think we're not even going to be able to accurately predict or describe what's just even 20 years down the road in the field of AI. Exactly. But one of the things that catches me there is language. And I think one of the things that I witness in social media today is the decreased interval or time for processing language, meaning it required time to both think about what you would say, hear it, formulate a response, and communicate it back.
Yeah.
With artificial intelligence, that processing time goes to milliseconds, or if anything, right? And so what do you think will happen in human communication language? Will language be necessary, that sort of listening and communicating back, or will we turn a lot of that over to the machines, and then what will our language look like?
Very interesting point, See, the thing is, if we look around the world, language, huge portions of language have been dedicated to us appearing smart. Very complicated words, very complicated, very technical language, which helps us become smarter and help us, sort of communicate with other experts in the field. But if you go outside that field, nobody has an idea what we are talking about. That creates huge barrier in communication, right? So now you can imagine if AI generally takes over this type of work, we won't need that complex language anymore. So in my opinion, we will return back to the basics, more human-focused language, which is geared towards connecting with each other rather than, utilizing it for a commercial purpose or for, helping us appear smart in front of other people. That's my opinion.
That's great. I'll go ahead and go to a second question while I challenge someone else to come to the mic next. So empathy, right? Can empathy be programmed? I know a lot of humans that can't be trained in empathy. So I wonder if it might just be easier to train a machine.
See, I think that is the answer, right? Because if we look at AI, it's a technology invented by human beings. And if we look at any other technology, in my opinion, it hasn't surpassed what humans are able to do. So in my opinion, yes, it technically is possible, but I think, especially with quantum computing, because when you really dig a little bit deeper into how our mind works and all that, with the quantum theory combined, I think this is a possibility. But the problem is that if humans cannot be empathetic to each other, we are never going to be thinking about building a system that is going to be empathetic. So I think we need to work on ourselves first, and then I think maybe technically it will be feasible to create an empathetic system.
I know some of the jobs that we already know. They're talking about lawyers, doctors, but and we fast food restaurants, all would be affected. But tell us maybe something that we might not really know, some of the jobs that might be eliminated that they already, you can foresee maybe a little bit better the future.
Things like writing. You'll be surprised how much data that we read and go through on everyday basis, which is generated by machines, and we think it's done by humans. In fact, there is a new technology, a bunch of new technologies, large language models like GPT-3 and a few others. They have encapsulated the entire human body of knowledge, and you can extract anything out of it just by giving it a hint. So that's one. These technologies can create art now, and that's mind-boggling. You can just say, okay, give me draw a painting of a rabbit jumping over a duck. It'll just create it, and a whole bunch of variations of it. And you can see how it can eliminate jobs, but then the other thing is we can utilize it for our benefit as well, because sometimes we may lack inspiration, and we can say, hey, AI, give me some inspiration, give me some ideas. And utilizing that idea, I can create an original piece of art. So a lot of these jobs which we do not associate with AI, they are being replaced. I'm trying to think of other surprising jobs. I actually found that question very interesting. I've been reading up on that. Nothing comes to mind immediately, but if something comes to mind, I'll circle back on that.
Is the frequency or the ranking of the word created by the AI similar to the ranking of the word created by the human, or can you distinguish one from another?
A very, very trained eye can distinguish it. I can tell you that, but most people cannot. Most people cannot distinguish between what is generated by AI and humans.
But my question is, they have a two different frequency distribution when you analyze languages.
I'm not a linguist, so I won't be able to comment on that, but all I can tell you is that it actually simulates every aspect of human language, including the frequency of word usage and all that. And that is how it becomes distinguishable between between real writing and AI-generated writing. A lot of the news articles that you read these days, they are all auto-generated.
Hello? Does it include humor?
Absolutely.
Humor, yeah.
Yes. Actually, you can create jokes. You can ask AI to create jokes. Sarcasm, it can do that. It's a wrong example, but I think Microsoft tried to come up with an auto tweet bot, which could just talk to people automatically. Now, people are smarter. They actually started saying some negative things, turning it towards racism to see where the bot will go, and it actually started becoming racist. So Microsoft shut it down. So you can see, like, AI is not there yet. It can be manipulated by humans, but it's getting very, very close where it can actually start to talk to humans.
Hi, so I have a question about storytelling. So a lot of the people that go into technical fields, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Typically are very good at that and lack that that aspect. Mm-hmm. And I found so I'm finishing a PhD, and I found that people in my field started with an English major and then became technologists, and they write beautifully. So they have a very compelling message, and they know how to drive us into a very exciting story. What would you suggest for everybody, right, to do now to be able to bring that compelling story with data?
Sure. First of all, watch some Pixar movies.
Yeah.
So actually, it's on a serious note. So there are two story frameworks that people can read up on. One is called Hero's Journey framework. So basically, if you look at any major movie, you'll find certain sequences happen in that movie. Like, at the beginning of the movie, nothing, like there's a normal person living their life, and something happens in their life, some event happens which leads them to a different type of life, like you take Star Wars, you take Matrix, you take all of these, like even animated movies. So they go off onto this adventure, and then they overcome a lot of challenges, that's the bulk of that story, And then towards the end, they overcome all the challenges, and now they are, they are victorious. they're coming back. That's the general sort of flow of every story. And Pixar uses similar framework, and they are tried and tested frameworks. So anybody can just Google Pixar story framework or hero's journey framework and take any situation in life, in business, and superimpose that story framework to create a story that is engaging. Because as human beings, what we want is inspiration. And every story, the format of the story is you start somewhere low, low emotional point, nothing is happening or negative events are happening, and towards the end, there's a happy ending, like, everybody's happy. And so that's the general sort of format of a story. If you apply that in a business format, you can just say, oh, before we implemented this, things were terrible, and blah, blah, blah. And then things improved. Okay, that's the story.
Thank you.
I have a question. And it's related to what the first question of the gentleman over there asked. It's related to culture, okay? As you were explaining, languages, maybe we're going to have a universal language. What happened with our culture? As humans, we develop, different cultures in different countries, maybe related to locations, no? But with AI, it's something that we try to be, something universal, even the internet, it's globally, no? But what is going to happen with our cultures? Well, you said our inspirations. That's why we create something, different. We have different ideas. If we, keep only the thing of AI, giving us everything, how we can protect, our difference? How, we think, different than you, the other gentleman, the lady, how we can protect that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And there are two answers to it, right? One is that what we consume as information is somewhat controlled, somewhat curated, somewhat affected by the platforms that are, sharing that information. So social media being the biggest platform, like there are 3 billion people on that. So what we think about is affected by these social media platforms. But if you take it on the flip side, we are also affected positively, because now sitting here in Miami, I can experience a culture, South American culture. I can learn about culture in China. I can learn about culture in any part of the world, and I can pick up things that I like about that culture, incorporate into my culture, right? So it's also encouraging cross-pollination.
But as you say, social medias, almost maybe here in this country use social medias. If you don't, like check what is doing the social medias, as you said, maybe they are showing you what is happening in another country, or maybe they don't. If they don't want, they can disappear maybe another culture because they are not going to show you what is happening in another place. So how, of course, you say that, of course, it's going to help us, communicate with another people, but if we leave that, without any checking, I know that I think UNICEF had, I think a month, 2 months, 3 months ago, like a composition telling how to get the biases and check, everything. Because I think we need, I don't know, if a global organization that check, because if we let AI to do whatever they want, they are going to take, I don't know, the biases from whoever, coded the logarithm.
So a number of points come to mind, right? One is that we cannot blame a technology for doing anything. It's us humans that, with fire, I can cook food or I can burn down a house. And that's true for any other technology. So, and then the other thing is, I talked about human capability to adapt. I mean, in most of the movies, when there's a time bomb being set off, generally in the last 5 seconds, we find a way to switch it off, right? So, yes, bias is a problem. Yes, all these problems are there. But you will see that as human beings, we're always looking for a problem to solve, right? So now this problem has been created by all these giants. Now there's going to be yet another giant that will solve that problem. That may create another problem, but this problem will be solved eventually. Just like you're mentioning, we are talking about it now, how to eliminate bias and all that. And the third thing is, this is the thing that is always gets us. The bias is showing up because we are biased. So unless we remove our own bias, we cannot blame the technology. And the only way we can remove our bias is we first start to, take part in these conversations and understand other people. Because as much as I know about these algorithms on social media, the objectives they are trying to optimize it is profit. Profit comes from engagement. Engagement comes from people staying on the platform. And that comes when people start to fight with each other. So their algorithms are optimized to make sure that you are paired up with somebody who you have a difference of opinion with. Same thing can be done in a different way. So when the profit objectives start to shift or the problem becomes too big, there's going to be a solution to that, right? So
last question, because I don't want to take more time, but what you were referring as soft skills, it was your, I don't know, utopia way for us to be like AI and robots doing a lot of things, and for us to be thinking like, I don't know, everybody is like Socrates, like thinking to do this or...
No. Although it may not be a bad thing, but it's more like, what I think you mentioned it earlier. I'm an engineer by trade, and I had the terrible life experience of first 40 years of not able to convey my thoughts to others and understand what they were trying to say. Because I was always in the engineering mindset, and they were always in the different mindset. So I think the first thing to do is just learn how to communicate with each other and listen. Because we are always too eager to present our ideas. And generally when we are having a conversation, we listen to the other person just waiting for them to just shut up so that I can put my point in, right? But if you flip that, things start to shift very, very radically. You understand more. You pick up a lot more details, and that makes you more powerful. So I think if you just start there, that covers a whole bunch of soft skills that we need.
So thank you so much, Mr. Aggarwal, for joining us today and actually for walking us through specific facts in the history of humanity and also making an emphasis that AI is here to help. Also, thank you so much to our audience here for such a brilliant questions. I know there are always many ethical concerns on AI. That's why I'm also taking the opportunity for the students that are watching us and maybe some students that are here, that our course AI Thinking is open for enrollment. So many of all those questions would be addressed during the course. So I'm taking this opportunity to mention it that yes, that it's time to apply. So thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate the time of our speaker. And hope to see you during the next month. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're watching MDC-TV.